Allow me to ask you a question that might seem bold, even provocative. Recall that feeling, not just fleeting annoyance, but a deep, almost visceral aversion that suddenly overtakes you at the sight of a certain quality in another person. Or perhaps this sensation arises when you encounter your own inexplicable, persistent self-sabotage, a habit you can't break, even though you intellectually understand its destructiveness. This isn't just discomfort. It's a raw nerve, a point where your inner peace shatters against an invisible wall, behind which lies something more profound. It's not just a coincidence, not merely someone's annoying trait or your personal weakness. Here, at the very heart of this sharp, almost unbearable sensation, lies one of the most paradoxical and powerful keys to your own wholeness. This is your personal irritation point, and its scandalous secret is this: what evokes such a fierce response in you, be it blatant arrogance, naked vulnerability, reckless disregard, or conversely excessive strictness and control, is not just an external manifestation of someone else's nature. It's an echo, a reflection, even a kind of phantom pain from those parts of your own soul that you once, perhaps long ago and very carefully, decided to banish. Yes, precisely. Those impulses, desires, and character traits that were deemed unacceptable, dangerous, or shameful by society, family, or yourself did not disappear without a trace. They didn't vanish into oblivion. On the contrary, they became your internal exiles, dwelling in the dark, unexplored corners of your psyche, far from the light of consciousness, and they make their presence known, often in the most unexpected and unpleasant ways, through our reactions to others, through our inexplicable failures, through our recurring patterns. The paradox is that it is precisely these rejected fragments that possess immense untapped power, capable of either destroying your life from within or, when integrated, becoming a source of genuine strength and freedom. And now, the question that leads us deeper: when, at what point in your life's journey did you first feel this internal rupture? When did you learn that qualities that could have been the foundation of your uniqueness, your capacity for healthy aggression, your right to make mistakes, your genuine vulnerability, that all of this was actually bad, shameful, or dangerous? When were these inner citizens deprived of their rights and sent into exile, becoming invisible but ever-present exiles of your own soul? This knowledge lies at the heart of understanding how our shadow is formed. Each of us carries within us this invisible map drawn with lines of rejection. At what moment, you might ask, did the first crack appear in the integrity of your soul? When exactly did the whispers of the world, the voices of parents, teachers, society, or perhaps your own strict inner censor first turn a part of you into an exile, locking it behind 7 seals? Remember the moment when qualities necessary for genuine self-knowledge and deep introspection were branded as selfishness, oddness, or unseemly reclusiveness. And perhaps you were told them, stop dwelling on yourself, be like everyone else, or what are you always thinking about? Do something. And then the desire to understand your inner world, to hear your own voice, became something shameful, something to hide. Thus, your inner explorer, the one who could have been your most reliable guide, was banished. Or perhaps self-acceptance, with all the rough edges and unique contours of your nature, began to look like self-absorption, pride, or a lack of humility. You were taught that true value lies only in the approval of others, not in your own sense of fullness, and then you began to wear a mask, hiding your true self from the world, and more frighteningly, from yourself. Perhaps it was the moment when your healthy, vital aggression, that very force that allows you to defend personal boundaries, stand up for your beliefs, achieve goals, and forge your own path, was labeled anger, ill-mannered, unrestrained. You heard you good girls, boys don't do that. You can't be angry at elders. Be agreeable. And you, as a child or young person, learned, expressing this power is dangerous. It leads to condemnation, to isolation. It was banished to the hidden corners of your soul, transforming from a protector into a threat, from a driving force into a forbidden impulse. Or perhaps you were led to believe that the right to make mistakes is a luxury you cannot afford, that every misstep is not a step toward growth, but a stigma, proof of your inadequacy. Thus was born the striving for unattainable perfection, where any oversight was perceived as a catastrophe. And vulnerability, the ability to acknowledge your humanity, your imperfection, came to be seen as weakness, an open wound through which pain and ridicule entered the world. This fear of being insufficient, unsuccessful, foolish, imprisoned your ability to learn, to take risks, to be truly alive and spontaneous. These moments are not just memories. They are deep, formative psychic traumas, bifurcation points where the living, potential energy of your soul was frozen, cut off from consciousness. At these points, we built invisible prisons for parts of ourselves that seemed inconvenient, dangerous, or simply wrong in the eyes of those whose approval was vital for our survival and sense of security. We learned to hide our authenticity, to wear an armor of conformity, to meet others' expectations, to survive in a system that doesn't always value uniqueness and wholeness. This is how the invisible walls were formed, behind which our internal exiles reside. Those very qualities that once rejected do not disappear, do not vanish into oblivion. On the contrary, they gain strength in their confinement, becoming an uncontrolled, often destructive power. It is this process, this separation, this symbolic exile that is the root of many of our inner conflicts and inexplicable external reactions. For what we have rejected in ourselves often returns to us in a distorted form, reflected in other people, in our own inexplicable actions, or manifesting as an invisible hand that pushes us into recurring scenarios. We spoke of the anxious whisper of the soul, of the internal exile who rejected wreaks sabotage from within. But it's important to understand this is not merely a quirk of individual consciousness. It is a universal law of the psyche, as ancient as humanity itself. For each of us, to varying degrees, carries a shadow. Imagine an ancient tribe. To survive, it establishes rules, taboos, and if someone violates them, exhibiting qualities deemed dangerous or shameful, excessive aggression, weakness, or conversely, an indomitable thirst for freedom, they are banished. They are no longer part of the circle. Their name is not spoken. So it is within us. When in childhood, youth, or even later, we learn that certain parts of ourselves, be it anger, a desire for vulnerability, a creative impulse, or even ambition, are bad, are wrong, unacceptable. We banish them from the tribe of our consciousness. We build walls around them, lock them in the darkest dungeons of the soul. This is the exile from the tribe of your own self. But the exiles do not disappear. They do not vanish into oblivion. They merely go underground, gaining an invisible, yet no less powerful force. Imagine an unpaid bill. At first it's just a small sum, but with each day, each year, it accrues interest, turning into an insurmountable debt. Similarly, the energy of suppressed parts of the soul is the energy of an unpaid bill. The longer we ignore their call, the deeper we push them into the shadow, the more they press, the more destructively they manifest. They can erupt as inexplicable bursts of anger, apathy, recurring failures in relationships or career, or most insidiously, manifest through the mechanism of projection. What is projection? It's when we see in another person what we cannot or do not want to acknowledge in ourselves. Hatred, irrational irritation, contempt for certain qualities in others. This is almost always an echo of our own exiles, our unpaid bills. We resent someone else's audacity because we have forbidden ourselves healthy assertiveness. We despise someone else's weakness because we fear our own vulnerability. We cannot tolerate someone else's brilliance because we have extinguished our own inner light. The clearest example of this mechanism is in Stevenson's immortal work, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll, a respectable and virtuous gentleman of Victorian England, attempts to completely suppress all his base, unacceptable desires and impulses. He banishes them from his conscious tribe. But these exiles don't simply disappear. They materialize in the form of the monstrous Mr. Hyde, the embodiment of everything Jekyll so diligently hid and denied. And the more Jekyll tries to be exclusively good, the more sinister and uncontrollable his shadow double becomes, ultimately consuming him. This is not just a story of good and evil. It is a profound metaphor for the price we pay for internal exile, for how a suppressed shadow gains its own destructive life. That is why it is so important to turn toward those who evoke the strongest aversion in us. Because in their images, as in a mirror, those archetypal energies that were once banished from ourselves may be reflected. We spoke of shadows, of those invisible yet potent exiles that dwell in the hidden corners of our soul, manifesting as inexplicable irritation with the world or as elusive self-sabotage of our aspirations. But let's look deeper. What if these demons, these rejected parts, are not merely vices, but distorted reflections of our greatest gifts? What if within each of them lies something priceless, something we carelessly locked away in the dungeon of oblivion? Imagine you encounter rage, that untamed impulse that scorches everything in its path, that unrestrained force that once perhaps led you to destruction or forced you to retreat. You banished it, calling it unacceptable aggression, rudeness, ill-mannered, but beneath the mask of this demon hides the boundary guardian, your healthy aggression, the ability to assert your limits, protect your values, and defend your space. It is the flame of will, capable of moving mountains if directed toward creation. What right did you deny yourself by banishing this power? The right to self-defense, the right to say no, the right to act despite fear, the right to uphold your truth. You relinquished the opportunity to be the master of your own life, choosing instead to be a victim or a silent executor of others' scripts. Or consider the crying weakling, that part of you that craves compassion, that experiences pain and vulnerability, but which you ruthlessly suppressed, fearing to appear weak, incompetent, insufficient. You drove it away, labeling it helplessness or excessive emotionality. But in the shadow of this fear resides the source of depth, your capacity for genuine empathy, for sincere experience, for building true intimacy. It is a bridge to union with others and with yourself. What right did you deny yourself by banishing this demon? The right to vulnerability, the right to feel, the right to ask for help, the right to be imperfect and authentic. You forbade yourself to be human, striving for an illusory image of an unshakable fortress, thereby depriving yourself of true connection and warmth. And what about the eternal failure, that inner voice that condemns you for every mistake, every misstep, every imperfection? You banished it, fearing to be stupid, incapable, worthless. But in the shadow of this fear lives the master of experience, your capacity for learning, for flexibility, for innovation, for the courage to experiment. It is the alchemist of transformations, capable of extracting wisdom and new paths from failures. What right did you deny yourself by banishing this demon? The right to experiment, the right to imperfection, the right to grow through falling, the right to creative exploration, unafraid of mistakes. You deprived yourself of the opportunity to evolve, trapped in the fear of inadequacy. And finally, the self-lover, the one who dares to desire for themselves, to prioritize their needs above others, who dares to rejoice in their own accomplishments. You banish them, calling it selfishness, narcissism, callousness, fearing condemnation. But beneath this mask lies the guardian of one's essence, your self-worth, your confidence, your self-respect, your ability to be a support for yourself. It is the source of inner strength and self-sufficiency. What right did you deny yourself by banishing this demon? The right to your own needs, the right to self-respect, the right to your own happiness and well-being, the right to be the center of your world. You condemned yourself to eternal service to others' expectations, forgetting your own unique value. Each of these demons is merely a distorted mirror of a powerful force you denied the right to exist. And as long as these exiles remain in the shadow, they continue to influence your life, no longer as allies, but as invisible saboteurs. And sometimes it is precisely this fear of resembling your demons that compels us to make the most disadvantageous decisions for ourselves, driving us into impasses from which there seems to be no escape. Allow us now, descending to a new turn of the spiral, to look at the tangible consequences of this internal split. For the refusal to acknowledge one's internal exile, the fear of embracing the distorted reflections of its power, those very demons we spoke of earlier, results in not ephemeral but very real failures and suffering. This is especially acutely manifested where we strive for healing and self-knowledge. Imagine a soul tormented by anxiety, finally deciding to seek psychotherapy. It yearns for relief, but its internal exile, the one once punished for tears and vulnerability, whispers, "Don't show weakness, be strong, hide your pain." And so in sessions, this fear of resembling the demon of helplessness, of someone who can't cope, makes it erect invisible walls. It speaks of superficial things, avoids true depth, fearing to be too emotional or too broken. Therapy becomes a ritual where words are spoken, but true healing eludes. For the most valuable thing, genuine vulnerability, remains imprisoned. The fear of embracing the demon of its fragility, of its true need, results in an inability to accept help Or take a person who has chosen the path of a healer, a psychotherapist, a mentor. Their calling is to lead others to light, but their own internal exile, perhaps the one once taught to suppress healthy anger or assert boundaries, now manifests as a fear of resembling the demon of selfishness or aggression. They fear saying no, fear setting boundaries, fear their own power, because in their worldview, these qualities are for bad people. They become exhausted. Their empathy becomes not a source of energy, but a vortex that consumes them. They cannot say no to a client, a colleague, or themselves because the fear of embracing the demon of healthy aggression, which is actually the ability to self-protect and advocate for oneself, forces them to make disadvantageous decisions that lead to burnout and the loss of their own integrity. And what about someone who strives for self-development, for mastering new horizons? Their internal exile may be linked to the fear of making mistakes, to the demon of imperfection. They plan, study, meditate, but never act. Any potential misstep is perceived not as a lesson, but as a catastrophe, as confirmation of their deep inadequacy. The fear of resembling the demon of failure, of someone who stumbles and falls, paralyzes them at the very start of the journey. They abandon experiments, bold steps, genuine learning, because they are not ready to face what they perceive as their shadow incompetence. In all these examples, the fear of becoming that very demon, be it vulnerability, healthy aggression, or the right to make mistakes, forces us to make decisions that actively sabotage our own well-being and growth in the realm of self-knowledge and healing. These are not just failures, they are self-denial, a rejection of wholeness. Perhaps at this moment, an objection arises in your soul. Does this mean I must become what I fear? Release this demon and plunge into chaos? By no means. True work with the shadow is not a call to anarchy or indulgence in base instincts. It is not an invitation to become your demon, but an act of conscious recognition that its energy, imprisoned by fear, can be integrated and transformed. Rage, suppressed and distorted, manifests as passive aggression or self-aggression. Consciously acknowledged, it becomes a force for defending boundaries. Vulnerability, rejected, leads to isolation. Accepted, it opens the way to deep connection and empathy. The right to make mistakes, denied, causes paralysis. Acknowledged, it becomes a driver of growth and learning. This is not about being darkness, but about shedding light on forgotten corners of the soul, to reclaim lost parts, making them not enemies, but allies on the path to wholeness. But the shadow does not always manifest in repellent forms. Sometimes it takes on radiant forms, projected onto those we admire, subtly depriving us of our own treasures. We have journeyed through the shadowed valleys of the psyche where exiles dwell, those parts of us that have been rejected, branded, driven into the dark corners of the soul. But the paradox of the human psyche is deeper than it first appears. It is capable of exiling not only what frightens or seems unacceptable, but also what shines too brightly, what is our true yet unrevealed greatness. This is a phenomenon that Carl Jung called the golden shadow. Imagine not only anger but passion, not only weakness but unwavering strength, not only inadequacy but inner wisdom can be banished from the inner realm, hidden behind a veil of projection. We see these qualities in the external world, in those whom we place on a pedestal, whom we sincerely admire, especially in the field that draws us so deeply, be it Depth psychology, paths of self-knowledge, or the art of healing. We seek lighthouses, guides, those who seem to hold the keys to the mysteries of existence. We observe with awe their clarity of thought, their empathy, their capacity for insight, their gift for transformation. And in this sacred admiration, unwittingly, we commit the most subtle yet destructive act of self-sabotage. We give away our own yet unrealized power, our dormant talents, our unique path to knowledge. We believe that they possess that intuition. They are capable of seeing hidden connections they can lead. Our own wisdom, barely breaking through the soil, remains buried, for we have already assigned it an external guardian. This is not merely admiration. It is an act of delegating our own potential, turning it into someone else's property. Our inner library of knowledge remains unexplored because we prefer to read others' volumes. Our own capacity for deep insight into the essence of things, for healing, for transformation, for what initially led us on this path of self-knowledge remains unutilized. It becomes another exile, but this time an exile clothed in the golden robes of another's greatness. We deprive ourselves of the opportunity to become who we already are in potential, for our own radiance seems too bold, too daring, too not ours. Allow me to ask a question that might seem presumptuous, but it is vital for your path to wholeness. In the space you are exploring, the world of depth psychology, self-development, spiritual seeking, who is the one you have placed on a pedestal? Whose intellect, whose intuition, whose capacity for transformation seems almost unattainable, almost divine to you? Which of your own unrealized gifts, which of your dormant capacities for insight, for understanding, for healing have you perhaps given to this person, seeing them only in him or her? Realizing this step is the first breath on the path to reclaiming the true inheritance of your soul. For to become whole, we must gather not only the shards of darkness, but also the shining facets of light that we have so generously scattered across the world, believing they belong to someone else. We have spoken of shadows, of invisible exiles that roam the fringes of our soul, manifesting as either caustic irritation with the world or as elusive self-sabotage of our aspirations. We touched upon demons, distorted reflections of our suppressed strengths, and the golden shadow, shining facets that we project onto external pedestals, refusing to acknowledge them as our own. But acknowledgement is merely dawn. True alchemy begins when we decide not just to see, but to bring these exiles home. The new philosophy I propose is simple in its audacity. True strength does not lie in fleeing from what frightens or in venerating what inspires. It lies in reclaiming everything that was ceded to external forces. Both the demons and the gods that inhabit our inner world are projections, and in each of them lies a key to our sovereignty. The one you despise may merely be a distorted mirror of your own suppressed power, your healthy aggression, your capacity for self-defense, which was exiled for being unacceptable. And the one you admire boundlessly, they are not an external idol, but a whisper of your own unrevealed potential, your intuition, wisdom, creative power, which was locked away in the dungeon of modesty or fear of being too much. How then do we begin this process of reclamation? I propose a simple yet profound exercise, which I call the echo chamber of the self. And it requires no analyst couches or years of sessions, only sincerity and a readiness to meet yourself. Exercise, the echo chamber of the self. Choose a projection. Think of a person who evokes very strong emotions in you. This could be someone who irritates you unbearably, whose behavior you find unacceptable, or conversely, someone you admire immensely, whose qualities seem unattainable to you. Choose one such person and one specific character trait or behavior that triggers this intense reaction in you. Two. Isolating the quality. Separate this quality from the person. For example, if someone's overconfidence irritates you or someone's serenity inspires you, write down this quality. 3. Meeting the mirror. Now ask yourself, looking deep within, where do I exhibit this quality? Where does this quality live within me, even in its most hidden, suppressed, or distorted form? If it's a negative quality, e.g., overconfidence, aggression, weakness, consider where you fear being this way. Where do you suppress these energies within yourself out of fear of judgment or rejection? Perhaps your overconfidence manifests as hidden stubbornness and aggression as passive aggression or chronic irritation. Or conversely, you are so afraid of being weak that you exhaust yourself trying to always be strong, rejecting your natural need for rest and support. If it's a positive quality, e.g., serenity, creativity, wisdom, where do you refuse to acknowledge this quality in yourself? Where do you devalue your own manifestations of this trait? Perhaps your serenity manifests in rare moments of solitude that you consider unproductive. Your creativity in childhood drawings you long abandoned, or in unusual solutions you are afraid to voice. 4. Returning the exile. Realize that this quality is yours. It does not belong to the other person. It was merely projected onto them because you could not or would not see it in yourself. Say aloud or write, I acknowledge our name of quality as a part of myself. I bring this energy home. I choose to integrate it into my wholeness, using it in a healthy and constructive way. And this is not a call to permissiveness, but an act of conscious ownership. Your healthy aggression will become the ability to set boundaries. Your serenity, a source of inner support. Your creativity, a flow of self-expression. This act of returning is deeply transformative. It ends the internal civil war, where one part of us battles another, projecting its conflicts onto the external world. It brings not just understanding, but also strength that was dispersed in our projections and now gathers into one, creating a more cohesive, more whole self. When these internal exiles return home, the very landscape of the soul transforms. The space previously occupied by shadow and projections fills with new energy, opening the way to deeper, more ancient layers of the psyche. The question then arises, what happens when an individual, having integrated their disparate parts, begins to resonate with the universal patterns of existence, with those archetypal forces that lie at the core of all being?